Hello, and welcome back to Always the Horizon by Murdoch, as read by Livid Productions. Chapter 9, The Vampiric Bankers and Their Great Anti-Semite. We three agreed to part once more. Aphrodite would make her way back to the lagoon of nymphs and fairies, for she too, like all the gods, had been depleted of her past strength. Only time would tell if phenomena, the appendages of being, could be loved by man again. We slipped through the desert which gave birth to the Semite, and past the barren mountains where druids dare not tread. Finally, we make our way to a small village, surrounded by the undead forest. It is said that each of these trees started as a man impaled on a pike, that the one who impaled them was born a vampire, from the stock of Satan himself. However, that is merely a myth, for in truth, he was not a vampire, but only a man, and it wasn't men that he impaled. No, they were the Mohammedan ghouls, those beasts from the south who for centuries would enslave our youth and forcefully convert them, or leave them nailed to that old Semitic tree. The story itself makes one wish to be a crusader, but what were the Crusades if not a Semitic civil war? Both fight for the tree of Abraham. One, as well as the other, propagates Semitic myths. Finally, we reach the village that lies in the heart of the forest. Perhaps here we can get some rest before we make our way to the swamps of sadness. Ryder, do you see what I see? Nearly everyone here looks pale and sickly. Fear and despondency mark their faces. As these shadows of people drift through the streets, suddenly I hear a shout.
It's the Semitic vampires and their blood magic that's put us in this sorry state.
We look to see a man standing on a small stage built out of the side of a traveling wagon. On top of the wagon reads a sign, The Great Anti-Semite. Oddly enough, this man who rants and raves is wearing a very similar attire to my own. He even wears my crimson swastika cloak. The crowd, from time to time, cheers and calls out profanities as this great anti-Semite gives his lecture. I turn to a villager who stands in the crowd and speak. Tell me, friend, who is this great anti-Semite, and what are these Semitic vampires that he speaks of? The villager, wearing torn rags and tired eyes, replies, This here is our leader, for he is the only one who speaks up in the name of truth. We were once a happy village until the communist ogres arrived and exacted on us their cruel demands. You see, they came with their guns and forced us to annually give up 3/4 of all the food we grow. It was difficult enough to begin with. However, a blight set in not too long after, which made our task impossible. When the Semitic vampires first came, we thought they were a godsend. They offered us aid, the use of their dark power. All they asked for in exchange was a single vial of blood from our folk. After we had agreed on terms, we awoke the next day to see our crops had grown exponentially. And when the communist ogres came and took what they wanted, we even had enough left so that our poor could still eat. A shout is heard as the great anti-Semite is met on stage with some type of Semitic goblin. The villager looks back to me as he states, Not long after that, the blight returned to our fields. We went back to the Semitic vampires and asked for aid once more. They agreed. However, the price was to be changed. Now they asked for an entire barrel of the blood of our folk. What choice did we have but to agree? Each man from the village gave what he had, but eventually it required the women and children to reach our quota. This process of losing our crops and giving up our blood to the Semitic vampire has gone on for 3 seasons now. At present, the vampires are asking that we accept a new kind of debt, for the blood of our children's children is now forfeit. The vampires will once again loan us their dark magic, but at what cost? Fortunately, the Great Anti-Semite has come to aid us in our time of need. A Semitic goblin runs from one side of the stage to the other as the Great Anti-Semite calls out,
You can run, but you cannot hide, Semitic goblin, for the forces of good cannot be stopped.
The Great Anti-Semite pulls out a wooden sword and thrusts it toward the goblin. The goblin gives out a loud screech as it wobbles from one side to the other until finally falls back behind the wagon. The crowd gives out a cheer, and money is thrown onto the stage. I look to the villager and ask, why did they throw their money at him like this? The villager, now wearing a half-hearted smile, replies, We give him money to say what we think. In confusion, I ask, You pay him to say what you think? I make my way around the wagon to see where the slain goblin had fallen. However, when I turn the corner, to my surprise, before me is the Semitic goblin, sitting on a wooden box, smoking. Suddenly he notices me, shrieking up wildly, nearly dropping his cigarette. Back on stage, the Anti-Semite calls out,
Yes, very soon indeed, I will make my way up to that dreaded castle and get rid of those damned vampires.
The crowd cheers in jubilation. Suddenly, I walk on the stage, holding the Semitic goblin by the collar as it struggles in vain. The crowd gasps as one of the villagers calls out, Look! The goblin still lives! I move forward to meet the Great Anti-Semite, and I begin to notice his strange appearance. He wears the mask of a man, but moves and shakes about, unlike one. I speak to him. Your sword does not appear to be an effective means of dispatching these creatures. But fear not, for they are small and weak, and one only requires a minuscule amount of strength to send them to their maker. In an instant, I snap the neck of the Semitic goblin. The Great Anti-Semite shrieks, and it may have been the sounds of the crowd, but I swear I heard him say, Oh no, Larry! I drop the dead creature to the stage floor as I cry out, Now let us go as brothers hand in hand and topple these Semitic vampires who feed off you and your folk with their debt slavery. The villagers shout and raise their fists in accord. Suddenly, the Great Anti-Semite calls out,
No, we can't go to the castle where the vampires lie.
The crowd goes silent. In confusion, I ask, Why not? A villager from the crowd echoes, Yeah! Why not? And before long, voices from all over the crowd are demanding an answer. Why not? The Great Anti-Semite raises his hands to calm the crowd as he begins to speak.
Have I not been here aiding you all this time? Now you question me, your leader. Do you not realize I've been fighting goblins on your behalf? Tell me, did I not lead the first party who went to kill those monsters up on the hill? Of course, it was unfortunate that all of my companions were killed, and I was the only one who survived the ordeal. But I was there.
I look down to see the Great Anti-Semite's legs, very thin and slightly green. I look to you, with my eyebrow raised high. Ryder, are you thinking what I'm thinking? In an instant, I rip off the cloak of the Great Anti-Semite, and suddenly we are met with 2 gypsy goblins, one on top of the other, so as to reach the height of a man. They both cry out as they fall to the stage floor. They begin scurrying about, trying to gather as much coin as possible back into their pockets. These gypsy goblins, much like their cousins of the Semitic branch, are creatures born of the unknowing, for they are content being parasites. With my boot, I crush the skull of the first gypsy goblin. I seize the other and hold him before the crowd as I speak. For too long you have put your hopes in false prophets and con men. The gypsy goblin begins to cry out in fear as it claws at my arm futilely. A villager calls out to me, Who is to lead our flock now? I smile as I state, You shall lead yourselves, and the best of you will guide the others, not because of your names or positions, but by your actions alone. You cannot allow your village to die in a single blow at the loss of some false shepherd, for the village must live, regardless of the comings and goings of kings and great men. When the communists return, you must no longer be a flock of sheep looking for a shepherd. You must now be a pack of hungry wolves, and the wolf who claims the greatest share of communist blood will be your guide. Now, whet your fangs! I throw the gypsy goblin into the crowd as they smash, stab, and tear him limb from limb. Ryder, we came here to find rest before venturing forward, but it seems we have only met more obstacles. Come, let us make our way to the Semitic vampire's castle that looms over this poor European village. We leave the villagers to rest, as they are in no shape to wage war against vampires. The hot sun bakes our backs as we journey up the long path to the dark castle. When we finally arrive at the entrance, we are met with a large door with knockers made of iron in the shape of gargoyles. Ryder, you hide in the bushes so that we may catch them off guard. I knock 3 times, and we wait. Suddenly, a window on the door opens, and a Semitic goblin face is seen. It looks to me as it states,
"You're a little early, aren't you? Where's Larry? Come on, come on."
The door opens, and the goblin grabs my hand and pulls me in. It yells out to me,
"Are you two fools? Coming here in the middle of the day? Don't you realize one of the villagers might spot you?"
My eyes wander here in the interior of this dark castle. Each window is covered up with thick, black curtains, and maps are fastened on every wall. These maps are of different places, all over the world, yet they share a common theme. Each map has the capital city of a region outlined, with numbers and dates all written in red. Piles of gold and vials of blood lie everywhere in this room. Even the crops that those villagers labored so hard to cultivate now lay rotting on the floor. Here in this accursed place. High above, I see banners adorned with the hammer and sickle that hang on the ceilings. So too do I see caskets, but they are empty. I look up to finally see the old Semitic vampires, surrounded by notebooks and portfolios. I call out to them, "How strange that communist ogres would allow for such lucrative banking in their midst. Even stranger that these vampiric capitalists would adorn their castle with so many hammers and sickles." One of the vampires, in confusion, remarks,
"What are you gypsies on about? Don't we pay you enough to keep the villagers quiet? Must I pay you more so that you will keep silent and spare me your annoyance? Now go. Tomorrow you must once again lecture the people on how the next day will be their redemption. And when that day comes, you must be there again to tell them that they must wait once more, and so on, and so on."
I raise my eyebrow as I let out. "I believe you have me confused for..." But I am cut off when the old Semitic vampire cries out,
"No, it is you who are confused, you filthy gypsy. Now silence."
A female vampire looks to the males as she states,
"It's so hard to find good goyim these days. One must always fear that a red ogre might become a starling. I suppose I'll let him break free eventually. It is a good thing that these gypsies are harmless. Remember when this one brought us all those menfolk? We feasted for days. Did it not come up with that trick all on its own? Come, brothers, let us show some respect to our gypsy guest."
The old Semitic vampire barks,
"All of these animals disgust me, for they aren't fit to lick our boots."
The vampires burst into laughter as they look at me, and then back at each other. "Ryder, I do not intend on leaving you outside alone for too much longer. I grow weary of this place. This international clique who support the communists with crooked capitalism, who feed off the blood of the children of Europe, must be abolished. Here, now, in the 21st century. This international debt slavery, this tithe of our children's children, has fed a parasite unlike any other in history. A people whose entire power system is based on something as hollow as debt and interest rates. These bloodsuckers move into a region and sap its strength, its very vitality. I call out to the vampires. I am no gypsy, I am an Aryan. They all pause, with a look of confusion and fear. The female vampire lets out,
What did you say?
I begin walking through the room, my hands touching various objects from the gold coins to the black curtains. I pause and then respond. How strange. I thought you vampires slept during the day, but I suppose you must find time to both prey on the living and count your coins. Back at my old pub, we used to argue late into the night about how to destroy this international banking system, built on debt slavery. Some said that interest rates should be completely abolished. Others argued that loans in the end were fine. It was the Semite that had to go. The old Semitic vampire's mouth drops as his eyes ever widen. I give him a great smile as I let out. I always held the position that if one wished to destroy this parasitic system, he must combat it just as he would a den of vampires. I wink at the female Semitic vampire as I state, you must merely bring it into the light. In an instant, I pull back the black curtains. Light bursts into the room, and immediately the vampires are turned to dust. We return to the villagers with what gold we could carry. I look out to them and speak. We are no communists, but today we have killed the Semitic Vampiric Bankers and intend to give away their wealth to the folk. Take this gold to the nearby towns and purchase weapons of steel that thirst for ogre blood. When the communists return, you must liquidate them in full. Their corpses will serve as sufficient fertilizer for your crops. Go then to every town of every nation of our kind and unshackle them from the parasite. Today you shall have your freedom and your weapons and fresh soil to begin anew.